And we begin in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to TheReQuest. 'Tis I, Captain Logan, and joining me, as always, is Austin, the Day Ghost.
Ghost Chop.
And today, Austin and I are going to review the first volume of the original 1971 Kamen Rider manga. And this is a thing that was requested by Jajira on Patreon, so thanks very much to you, sir. We are broadcasting this one live. We've never done that before with one of these, and we have had a trial run of this that we thought was the real deal when we were recording it. I had some really bizarre glitch with OBS, which I used to record as well as broadcast, because it's very simple to do the same thing that we do broadcast, but just record with the same software. And it's worked 900 times, but the 901st time, I guess, was just a bridge too far, Austin. It didn't record the audio. And the file was corrupted in such a way where it wouldn't have posted on YouTube even if it had recorded the audio. I don't know what the problem was. We did a test right before we started broadcasting, and after we restarted my machine, it was working just fine. So we actually wouldn't have to be broadcasting now, but I had already decided we were going to do that and thought, there's really no reason not to broadcast these, except a lot of these requests are very often more obscure things, or just more niche things, or things kind of outside of the Geekvolution wheelhouse. So the question is, how many people really care to see this as we're talking about it? And maybe that doesn't matter. If a few people happen to pop in and hang out with us while we're doing it, that's fun for everybody involved. And maybe Austin folks will sometimes come in that know this material better than us and can bring a little bit of information to the table as well.
It's like most times we do anything. I feel, though, like that was the SNL dress rehearsal and this is the live show.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to go infinitely worse, is what you're saying.
Pretty much, yeah. And you had to actually be there live to see the last one. And this is what's actually broadcast.
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes the dress rehearsal's better.
So, this is not my absolute first foray into Kamen Rider, but this is not a property that I know real well, and I've not watched a lot of it. Of the two of us, I'm the closer to an authority or an expert, but I don't actually know anything. It's just that I have actually seen a few episodes of a couple of series, and I'm friends with folks that know this stuff really well, so I've heard some things by osmosis, and I know a tiny bit about the history and just the general kind of idea behind this and where it kind of fits into tokusatsu and hinshi and stuff like that. Austin has never looked at this stuff.
No, this was my first time. Went in completely blind. The only manga I've ever read before this was Junji Ito. I'm a big fan of him, and I found reading it on paper was actually very easy. My mind kind of auto-corrected, where I was like, oh boy, reading right to left, this is going to be a huge pain. I don't know if I'm ready for this. And it ended up being perfectly fine. I had no issue. Reading it digitally, on the other hand, because I've only just started reading comics digitally, so I'm only just getting used to it. And it was so weird reading manga digitally. Because I read this over 2 nights, and the second night, I was like, oh, you know what, I'll go back a few panels just to make sure I'm right into what I'm reading, and I start going. It's like, this doesn't look familiar. This doesn't look familiar. This doesn't look familiar. Weird. Did it drop me off in a random spot? Oh, I'm going the wrong way.
Yeah, sometimes digital with manga will go right to left like manga usually does, and sometimes depending on the app you're using or whatever, you have to swipe right the regular direction when reading Western comics. So when you get one like that, you still have to read right to left at the top of the page and go down, but you're still going this way.
No, it was very awkward. I was not prepared for that.
Yeah, this is a weird thing to go to first in your initial foray into digital comics.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because I've been reading a bunch of classic Ghost Rider and now Kamen Rider, all within a week.
Yeah, so. And both 70s things, which is interesting. Exactly. That can only be a few years after this. Right, because I want to say
Yeah,
Ghost
I
Rider
should have
starts
looked
in
it up
what,
because
mid
we didn't know
70s, late
last time.
70s?
Yeah, because he starts off in Marvel Spotlight. It's like the same book that, or the same like run of comics that has Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight.
See, I had forgotten it was Marvel Spotlight until you mentioned that in our dress rehearsal for this, and now neither of us is going to be able to surprise the other with any information.
No, and we didn't look that up since then. We still don't know.
Well, I didn't expect we were going to have to make the video again.
But when you did, you should have been like, when did Marvel Spotlight come out? I need to look that up.
So now Austin's thinking that the only things that are published digitally are 70s comics about guys on motorcycles.
Yeah, and both guys with masks apparently, because in like early Ghost Rider, every time they see him, they're like, "Look at that guy with his weird helmet. Let's go beat up that guy."
I don't know why they think that. Do they think it's a special effect? Do they think, like, he lit his own head on fire? He's got a mask, but it's on fire?
I can't even begin to explain that.
I don't.
I do like early Ghost Rider, but there's some like, some sillier stuff.
Well, and of course, these are both. I didn't expect that we'd be comparing Ghost Rider and Kamen Rider, at least the last video. Now I did expect that because we did that before. But both
Don't worry,
things.
I got some more curveballs to hit you with later.
I'm sure you do. Both things that are pretty, silly in their own right. This is absurd as a matter of course, although somehow reads a little less so in comic book form, just because it's so ultra stylized and moody and atmospheric, and it feels like it kind of, has its own internal logic and its own sense of reality. I want to say right out the gate that this is material that reads better on the page than it does as a TV show, I think. And, like, I knew that Kamen Rider had mangas. I knew that the Sentai's had that. I had no idea that that the manga and the TV show were created by the same person and made at exactly the same time. So Kamen Rider is created by Shotaro Ishinomori, who is kind of a Stan Lee figure in Japan. He is like one of the major grandfathers of manga. He's a real big deal over there, not talked about enough here, certainly. Doesn't get the appreciation and acclaim here, certainly, that he ought to. He has apparently still the record, the world record, according to Guinness, of most pages drawn by a single artist. And it's like some 192,000 pages or something. Of course, this kind of stuff is a testament to the Japanese work ethic. It's insane to consider that the man wrote and drew that much, like this much material, at the same time as he was involved in a television show. And, I mean, this was his brainchild. Of course, he's not, like, directing episodes and stuff. I don't know how, like, fully involved and like, hands-on he was with the TV show. But I was trying to figure out initially which of these things came first. It seemed like a big mystery, because I always assumed that the mangas for these things, for Kamen Rider and Sentai, must have been, like with a lot of things, just been sort of like a graphic novelization, right? Like, you have a TV show, and then you bring in an artist that just adapts that material. And I assume that going into this, I didn't do my homework ahead of time. I never do with these. I always just sit down and read the thing and then do a little bit of research later. I want to go in as blind as humanly possible. And with this, I was immediately skeptical, because I was like, this feels like a guy with a creative vision. There's no way that Ishinomori, that this is not his brainchild. And it turns out that it is, that he created both things. And so you're not looking at adaptation with either things. You're looking at one guy who is simultaneously making two things in two different mediums. And I think that this is much better on paper than as it is on television, partly because of the limitations, of course, that you have on TV, but also because it's the man's unabashed vision.
Yeah, no, it was interesting watching the show, and because we both watched the first episode and reading this volume, because it's like you get to see to an extent, all film, TV, or whatever is compromised from the original idea, because film is so much of a group project. So no matter what, even without budget limitations like this would have, you're gonna get that anyways. So you get that versus just the like unabashed like creator's vision on like one side, and it was really interesting to see them both from that like perspective, to see how it's handled.
Yeah, and also lack of censorship and stuff. And certainly
That
the
too.
TV show doesn't look super censored. It's kind of impressive what we're getting away with in 1971 for children's television versus what we can do over here. But they're not going to go as far in the violence and language department as the book does. That's assuming that some of the profanity and stuff is direct translation, of course.
Yeah, of course, because there's always like, who knows what that.
And this is being translated also decades later and in hindsight. And so even in 2002, which I think is when the version of this that we're reading was published and translated, you're still, again, decades after the fact. So you're not really putting this out for kids. You're putting this out mostly for the adults that grew up on it or have gone back and looked at it later. So I think the profanity and stuff, not that there's a ton of it, but it fits what we're looking at. This gets somewhat gruesome in places and is, like real hokey and silly in some of its ideas, but it has a darkness and a pathos to itself as well. Somebody, Thomas Lowe in the comments said, "Oh, look at Japanese Batman." This was massively influenced by Batman, both tonally and some in characterization and in some of the visuals. And apparently, this guy was supposed to do a Batman crossover with Kamen Rider for DC in the mid to late 90s, and he passed away before it could happen. But that's how intertwined this was with Batman.
Yeah, it's interesting how like intertwined it is with both Batman and Spider-Man.
He's joking because those are villains in the book. There is a villain named Spider-Man and a villain named Batman. And even Shocker's in this. And it's not even a person. It's a whole organization.
And you also get Cobra! But also, there is like legitimate ties to Spider-Man as well.
I agree with that. I don't think this is looking at G.I. Joe.
No, but there's Cobra Man. I just wanted to yell Cobra.
Although, we can't be sure of that because we only read the first, 9 pages of the Cobra one.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe in the next one, Snake Eyes will show up.
So, let's talk for a minute about how this is collected, shall we? So, we read this, again, digitally. It is being released finally. This is a real timely moment to do this, I guess, because this is coming out in hardcover, I think, later in the year. I don't think that's been released yet.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. This is another thing we didn't know last time.
Jajira brought that up, and I think that's part of the reason that he suggested that we talk about this. Like I said, I think this version was put out around 2002, and I don't know if it got a physical release. It might have just been digital. I'm really not sure. But the way it's collected is strange, because it stops mid-issue.
Not even just mid-issue, like mid-fight scene.
And at the beginning of a new big arc, we get 2 major arcs here. The first is kind of the initial origin of, and I guess you could say that all of this is kind of chronicling origin in the first place, but you have kind of the birth of Kamen Rider, and we'll talk here in a minute about how all that happens, give you a little bit of a rundown with synopsis, and then he's fighting a mutant cyborg sent after him by the evil organization that initially gives him his powers, which is Spider-Man. And then later, and then the second big arc, he's fighting Batman. And hilariously, each of those is actually Man-Spider and Man-Bat, respectively, pretty much. It's not a man that dresses up as a bat or a spider. It's a man that is transformed into a gruesome monster creature of either of those. And then the third one is a Cobra Man, and that it looks like that's going to be the beginning of another big long arc, but for some reason the trade just stops in the middle of a fight sequence. And also the art has massively shifted at that point as well, and we only get a tiny taste of that.
No, it becomes super cartoony in that last issue to the point where I thought the artist had switched until you had told me that it hadn't.
Yeah, isn't that strange? And I don't know. My guess is that some of those, and we'll take a look at some of the art here in a second. My guess is that some of uh, the scenes are getting a little bit more comedic and jokey and stuff, and he just decides to switch to something more of that kind of like jokey anime, almost sitcom thing in
Yeah,
the art, because you really didn't have any of that before. You didn't have the like over the top exaggerated like people screaming at each other over something mundane and silly, which in Japan is hilarious, apparently. That show,
Yeah,
I've had to learn to be okay with some of those scenes. That was one of the big things when I was younger that always turned me off to watching anime or reading manga. Is just those scenes are so exaggerated. People aren't acting at all like people, and even beyond that, I just don't think it's funny. It's like they have their own version of slapstick. That's like it's like a vocal slapstick. Just everything is funnier if there's spittle coming out of people's faces and they have like X's on their eyes and there's like their mouths are like 19 times too like that's hilarious.
I mean, this does sound funny.
It's funnier when you
get is like
it's funnier when you explain it, Austin.
That is true. The most you get is, and I think it's the second issue. I think it's in the Batman one. There's a panel with like the old guy where his neck's like really long and he's like. And he's making a weird face. That's kind of like the most you get for like cartooniness outside of that third issue. Outside of that, like it is more like realistic, I guess, like in how it's drawn.
Well, let's go ahead and look at some of the art, shall we? And when you this is a good segue because when you say realistic, I'll pull this up for you too, Austin, so you can see what we're looking at.
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I was looking in the news today. I don't know if you saw this, but I saw.
You read the news
Greg
today?
Cox,
Oh boy!
Greg Cox wrote the Dark Knight Rises novel. I don't know if you knew that. It was in the news today.
So, no one's gonna know why you did that, but that was our catch.
I had to slip it back in.
That was our kind of high sign for making sure that I did screen share so that Austin was able to see what we were looking at. That was our secret phrase. It's not a secret anymore. But if I didn't say that, all the comments would be like, why is he bringing up the Dark Knight Rises novelization? From a decade ago, by the way. How is that movie that old? How are we 10 years away from the Dark Knight Rises?
No, Skyfall's like 10 years old this year.
Man.
It's crazy.
If you were 10, you were 20 now.
Then.
Say it again?
So we've had 2 Bond films since then.
Yeah, that should have been probably 4, but yeah.
Yeah, no, Sam Mendes is the only director to work on Bond in the 2010s.
So I was struck by a couple of things immediately cracking it open, pushing a link, and then looking at pages on my tablet. The first is, this guy really likes to draw cars.
Yeah, no, the 2 big things you see a lot are cars and Kamen Rider driving his motorcycle, specifically jumping on his motorcycle.
Yeah, and we'll see some of that here in a minute. And the other thing was just how photorealistic some of the machines are, especially cars. And it's interesting because, like I said earlier, this is really stylized. This does have a real, to some degree, a Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe to it. Maybe like what's the show I'm trying to think of? Johnny Quest kind of thing. I found myself thinking of that a little bit. And you would never think of that watching the TV show, of course, when you've got, obviously a precursor to Power Rangers kind of thing going on. But it is like really silly and goofy in some of its character models, or at least I should say like not super realistic. But with some of the machines and backgrounds and things, it gets almost photorealistic.
Yeah, no, that's clearly something that guy really likes.
One thing we should probably mention before we get any farther here, now that we're looking at a big, full-page spread, and there's a lot of these, and there's a lot of two-page spreads too, a lot of kind of pin-up stuff that would look really nice on your wall, is just how quickly this book reads.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I read this in 2 days. It's now like 2 weeks ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, we've been trying to get to this for a little while. I apologize for that. And this is why we went ahead and did this now instead of waiting, to the weekend, because we want to try to get back on track with the requests, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But so the first night, about 20 minutes in, I checked the page count, and I'm halfway through. And I was starting a bit late, so I was like, kind of worried that I wouldn't be able to finish it for the Friday that we were supposed to film it initially. And I was, I checked the time, 20 minutes. I'm like, well, I got like a whole other day. Like, I'm not going to finish this now. So put it down. Then the second time I do it, 20 minutes again, I'm done.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It just flies by. So, not a real dialogue-heavy, dialogue-driven book, of course. It's very focused on action, which you would expect for a tokusatsu kind of thing. I should mention, by the way, that this is, I want to say, again, the manga and the TV show simultaneously, and the TV show, of course, is known for it. One of, if not the first major henshin things, which is I think that's the term, which is a Japanese, transforming character. So, really, anything that has something like Morphin Time is in this category. Doesn't have to have giant monsters or giant robots. It's not that. It's not that thing. So that's the Sentai. When you get to, and that starts with, weirdly and hilariously, the Japanese Spider-Man series, which gives you both a transforming character. I think he basically does the transforming thing, and then because I haven't really ever sat through a whole episode of that, but of course also a giant robot, and then after that you get Sentai, and then over here in the 90s you get Power Rangers. And so this is like the. I keep wanting to say it's like tokusatsu. All tokusatsu means in Japan is things that are driven by special effects. But over here, we always think of tokusatsu as a Power Rangers-esque thing. So for the longest time, I thought to be a tokusatsu, you had to have transforming characters and robots that connected to make larger robots. And apparently, that's not exactly right. Apparently, even Godzilla is considered tokusatsu. But here you get the initial precursor to that without the giant robot.
Okay, yeah, because there was a few things that you thought this had in common with Power Rangers, right?
It had in Kamen Rider with Power Rangers. See,
I will slip it in this time.
That's where you're trying to make the video better, because we spent an hour on this before, and in that entire hour that never happened somehow. Anyway, so I knew you were going to do that somewhere. Well, of course, yeah, and of course this has a lot of things to do with Power Rangers, because the creator of this also was involved with Sentai too, and those are made by the same company, and they have crossovers and things. And even over here, we try to do the Power Rangers thing because that was so popular with Kamen Rider, and I forget which series now, because I never saw it outside of the Japanese footage in the American show. But we had Masked Rider, which only lasted for a season or two. I don't think that caught on real hard. I don't think it was even as popular as Beetleborgs, but because it got at least 2 seasons because it had metallics. But anyway, so we had in 3rd season a big crossover where, or I should say a spin-off thing, where we introduced Masked Rider in Power Rangers, and then he gets his own show. But over there, they did crossover movies all the time, and the big difference between them, as far as I understand it, is I think Kamen Rider more or less stays, and correct me if I'm wrong, because some of you guys will know a lot more about this than I do, and Jujira, I'm sure in a few places in this video, will shake his head and be like, no, Cap, you're dead wrong, but good effort. So I believe the big difference is Kamen Rider. Besides the fact that you're talking about like a lone wolf versus a team, right? Like this is Batman, Power Rangers is the Justice League, but you or Sentai, but you get a continuity of writers with Kamen Rider, and with Sentai it starts over every time. They're not in the same continuity, even though they've come up with excuses to do big anniversary things where they put a bunch of those characters all together finally. They're not in the same continuity forever, and Power Rangers went back and forth on that. Kamen Rider, I think, might have places where it's got one that's not in the continuity of the rest of it, but I think overall it does that. I'm not sure. One thing that's weird about Kamen Rider these days is they've kind of gotten away from, apparently, the writer aspect quite a bit. Eric's talked to me about this, where at the beginning it's all about motorcycles, and they still call it Kamen Rider, and they still have motorcycles, but they don't use them as much. It's not really about that. It's a lot more Power Ranger-esque, and actually, I said that Kamen Rider is one guy. Later on, they start being more teamish too, just like Sentai. Like the one that I've seen the most of, and by most of I mean a few episodes, is Kamen Rider Gaim, because Eric knew I would love it because it's basically Power Rangers with fruit morphs, which is the funniest thing. And the costumes actually look really great somehow, and it's awesome because they'll morph, and then there's this, and he says it in English, but there's this Japanese voice that's like pineapple, and it's the best.
Yeah, and they go, "It's Gaim time," and then they transform. That's another kind of weird parallel to Ghost Rider, then, because obviously we introduced the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider, who's all about like a car instead of a motorcycle, which is really weird. Always getting away from that rider thing.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because it seems like it starts from probably a guy with a love of motorcycles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also weird that it didn't that it took as long as it did before those shows got away from the writer thing, because another thing that Eric mentioned, and that I also saw in some of the research that I did, is the guy who plays him in the first series got really injured pretty early in the production, and you'd think that might make them wonder about some of the motorcycle shots that they're shooting. But despite that, again, because insane Japanese work ethic, he draws not the whole season, and I'm not even sure how far it goes. I think it's mostly just like origin stuff. But we should mention that at least with the one episode we watched, it's more or less the same story. He's, again, because it's not a thing adapting to another thing, or it's not the weird thing that you had with a lot of 70s and 80s things, especially, where you start with just scripts or series bibles of things, and you give it to a writer, and then he's using his best judgment and using his own imagination, and he kind of creates his own vision, but it looks nothing like the TV show. That happened with Star Trek. And with the Gold Key stuff and things like that. This, of course, is not that. But anyway, 98 episodes, that original series. 98, still the most that show ever had. And Austin, I don't get why, if you're going to make 98 episodes, why don't you just go for a full even 100? Just make 2 more. Throw a couple throwaway crap episodes in the middle just so you can save it 100.
Yeah, no, it's super weird, and I don't, just some shows, man, for whatever reason, they drop, like, people complain about, some shows where you have, like, the 23, 22 episode count, and they're like, oh, it's too many. And then you get shows, like, the original Transformers, season 2 is, like, 64 episodes, and then, there's that Charlie Sheen show, Anger Management, he did after the whole drug thing, and he got fired from his show. And the first season of that is 10 episodes, and the second is 90. Like, why? It's so weird.
Because they had to have 100 episodes. This is very important to them.
Yeah, and there were so many episodes, and nobody cared about that show that it's never been properly released on physical.
Well, and didn't you say that they started having to air it 3 times a week just to get them all out?
Well, yeah, I think from what I remember when I looked into it, there was something where they would just play them back to back. because there were so many episodes they had to put out.
So yeah, like I said, I don't know how far into the show this gets. I think it was put out in 3 or 4 volumes, and that was the whole run of this. So like, there's no way it's that entire season, because the first episode of that show gets to the end of where we are in the first arc of this, and that's at least 100 pages.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's basically just that first like issue or arc, like you said.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with page count, it feels really long compared to a TV episode, but takes about the same amount of time to read it. Maybe a little less.
Yeah, a little less, I think.
Because I mean, you're just looking at storyboards, and I'm not complaining when I say that. I think it's a perfectly valid way to use the medium. It's real kinetic. It's like I said, real visual storytelling. It's a lot of exciting, kind of exaggerated action. It feels like what Stan Lee was talking about with why he thought that a lot of the Marvel books, with what they were asking their artists to do, were superior to a lot of what was going on in the Golden Age and even at DC at the time, where you make sure that everything has a sense of melodrama and a sense of, and everything is heightened, and like characters are always really expressive no matter what they're doing, and all of that. Like this has that in spades.
Yeah, exactly. He knows what you came for, and it's, the like cool action, cool like Kamen Rider jumping around, doing his thing.
Yeah, and there are some cool and it kind of, to some degree, thought-provoking ideas here and there, but we don't spend a lot of time exploring them. Like I said earlier, there's a little bit of pathos to this character, and there's even a little bit of moralizing that happens with this character, but we don't spend a ton of time on it. And I think that the way he is using that is to facilitate the action instead of the other way around, and that's melodrama. That's the medium or the genre that he's working in, certainly. So I mean, I'm not going to complain that it's not traditional storytelling, because that's not what he's trying to do. But the idea is, if you sympathize with this guy, relate to him to some degree, if there is a little bit of conflict and like hard decisions he has to make, those action scenes are a lot more gripping, and because you care more about what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's you get like the action that you came for, but it's not entirely mindless. Like he does have, specific things. Like when he fights Batman, right before he kills him, he has this whole, I mean, it's not really like a whole speech, but a whole line where he's like, I don't really want to have to kill you. Like, it's not your fault that you became Batman. Like, the people that did this to me did this to you. But at the same time, you can't live. Like, you're going around as like a vampire, so I have to kill you at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's like people that get in your way that are still plugged into the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
like some of them, unfortunately, you end up having to take out for the sake of the greater good, and it's not right and it's not good. But there's the lesser of two evils question, and I was kind of surprised to see that here. And I think there's a place where he even accidentally gets someone killed in the middle of a fight, where he's like, "Oh man, I wish I didn't have to do that."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think there is too.
Austin, we're already half an hour into this, but why don't you give us just a real brief rundown about what this story is about, what happens in this book?
Okay, so initially you have this guy who gets kidnapped by the Shocker, and they're this organization that like kidnaps people, and they turn them into like cyborg mutant characters. And they're doing that to this guy, and they get stopped partway through, and he escapes, and he becomes Kamen Rider, and he's going to use his powers that he has to take down Shocker, who
he escapes really easily, by the way.
Very, very easily.
You wonder how everybody this has happened to didn't escape and get to keep their powers and not get turned into big, scary animal mutant people that are mutants and cyborgs? I don't know where the cyborg part comes in, by the way. Oh, and he also has mystical powers at the same time. His powers come from the earth. He's got like wind, like he talks to, because all these Japanese characters have to have this. I don't even know where it comes from. Like he's got to talk to like Mother Nature basically to give him his ability. But he's also a cyborg, but he's also like a mutant. But he's not a full-on mutant because he didn't turn into any kind of creature.
Well, if he finds like other, cyborgs that are they get their powers from other parts of nature, they can call on Captain Planet to fight Shocker.
I had that. Every time he said wind, I was like, where's water and heart and earth and fire and Go Planet?
Heart probably got killed by Batman in this universe. It's a lame power.
Mati couldn't do enough with that monkey against Batman.
Well, yeah, Batman showed up and he was like, I have heart, I love you, Batman, and then Batman just ate him.
He just goes, boom, 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 and Batman's like, what are you going to do with that? Why does Kamen Rider choose the bug motif, and does it have anything to do with his getting his powers? Like, if the procedure had gone 100% of the way through, what kind of creature would he have been turned into? And would it have been a bug? What is he? He's not a praying mantis. He's a grasshopper. Would it have been a grasshopper? Because it doesn't seem to come from anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. And then that like motif kind of isn't in the name either. It's just Masked Rider.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's got a pretty generic title for a real specific look. And I like his look a lot, by the way. But I kept wanting to read something into the fact that he chose an insect. Or does he even choose it? He seems to just have that helmet. Like, I'm not even sure where it came from.
Yeah, because he like falls into the water and then comes back out and he just is Kamen Rider.
Yeah.
So it seems to just... has,
in this page that I'm showing here, he's even got an explanation for what the point of the mask is. He's like, I have to hide my anger. And I'm like, I think you're just showing your anger. I think that anger is, I think that mask is reflecting your anger, which is actually an idea I like better, where it's like, I'm wearing this mask to show everybody these gruesome creatures that Shocker is turning the most brilliant minds in the world into, in order to take over the world and control everyone, because that's what they're after. By the way, I like that we have a villain that has a real clear motivation. We know exactly what it is they want, and they're kind of ominous, and they're scary, and they're foreboding, and it feels like they're kind of always there and always watching. They're kind of the Hydra of this world, and I think that works really well. But I wish because it's like, okay, you picked an animal, and there's all these like animal creatures that Shocker is turning everybody into, and so you know your face looks angry because of what they're doing to people, and you're gonna create an intentional perversion of the horrible thing they're doing to fight them. That's what it looks like he's doing. That's not what he's doing, but that visually it feels like that's what it ought to be. And then the bug thing, at first I thought might be, okay, they're trying to take over everyone and make like one mind, like a hive mind, like a lot of insect colonies and things like that. Like they take us all over and then they use us as drones. And so he's a bug to go like against that idea. Again, like perverting their own, horrible aesthetic. And that's not what it is either. It's like I can't find anything thematically in the choice of a grasshopper. I think it was just his kid liked grasshoppers, so he made him a grasshopper. That's what I read, is that Ishinomori's kid liked grasshoppers.
Well, I know for me personally, like when I don't want to show people I'm angry, I just put on a mask and punch people. But look
how angry he looks.
No, his like antenna or angry eyebrows.
Yeah, that's awesome. But it's so weird, is that it's the only thing that can hide my scars, and all my rage. I don't understand. It reflects your rage.
Yeah, I don't
know. It's weird when you have arbitrary choices that go so well with the material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just kind of like, this is just what it is, okay? Accept that. Move on.
And I'm not saying I need the thing to be a whole lot like deeper and philosophical than it is. I just wish that the character had more of a like personal reason or particular interest and hobbies that gets him to the bug motif. That is one of my only complaints about this as a piece. I mean, I enjoyed this immensely.
Yeah, that makes sense though for like the early superhero thing. Like it's not like Spider-Man becomes like a spider themed character, Batman becomes a Batman themed character, and it's just that's seemed like the thing to do. Like it is part of their character.
Yeah, there's real specific reasons for it.
Mm. Yeah, exactly.
And they reflect the personalities of those characters in some way. One of the things that I was confused about visually when I first started reading this was why the speech bubbles are long and go up and down, because I didn't remember seeing that before. And I was like, well, why would you need all that space when you just have words in the middle of a lot of these, especially when he's just got like one line where he's like Rider jump, and then I remembered, oh yeah, that's right, it's Japanese. Like we had to take the characters in the middle of that and replace them with English words, and the English words weren't going to be, one letter on a line going down.
Mm-hmm. When you still have that with the ellipses, and this time I remembered that word, where it's just like up to down. There was not an awkward 5 minutes of, the dot, dot, dot.
But I enjoyed watching you squirm, and I wish that we had it on camera. Like I said, in some places it gets a little bit gruesome, possibly for kids, and it knows just what it is, and I don't think is aimed at too young of an age group. I'm not totally sure in Japan who's getting their hands on what things in 1971. I assume that there's probably they don't have the comics code that we have that we had at that time, which is why they were able to just tell stories and not be bogged down constantly by censorship. But I don't know if there was ever anything on books warning parents that things weren't for kids and stuff like that. I would suspect not, but I would say that this book, even back then, I mean, we're talking about this with decades of hindsight, and also about a different culture with different sensibilities and stuff. But I don't know, probably like age 10, 12, and plus.
Mm-hmm. No, one of the things I really like about this book is that it feels like a guy just went, oh, like I like this, I like that, I like this, I like that.
Yeah.
And he just kind of took all of it and put it into his own thing that he was doing. And this guy clearly really likes horror stuff. Like your second issue or like story arc or whatever is just a vampire thing with a giant Batman.
Well, and it's that thing I'm always talking about, where a lot of the best fiction are pieces that aren't too concerned with who's reading it and accessibility. And of course, it can be a fine line between that and being self-indulgent. But as long as you're bringing enough context to the piece where most people can read it and understand what's going on, then after that it becomes up to taste. And he's absolutely doing that. He's just hoping that there's people out there that like the stuff that he likes. And he's not talking down to kids, and he's a little over their heads in places, and he's violent, and it gets again a little bit rough in places, but not to the point where it's too awfully horrifying. He's not trying to give kids nightmares.
No,
it's just
but
going as
Batman
far as it
also
needs to go to
gets,
tell a
like,
story. And there's
Batman also
consequences to
gets
violence, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy, and a precursor to what would eventually be Power Rangers, which is the antithesis of that, where there are never consequences to violence.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's my issue with Power Rangers. They never impale a giant Batman with a cross.
Yeah. I mean, they do stuff like that
Awesome.
in the Boom comics later, but it's still few and far between.
Mm-hmm. That's all I want in life.
So you get some great pages like this. You're not even seeing the entire page right now because this is a two-page spread, but just how I have this frame right now, this is just the middle of it. But I wanted to mention too that the art kind of I think there's some corners that get cut a little bit here and there with a lot of these Japanese artists that are drawing like 119 pages a day. That's hyperbole, but I mean,
Not for this guy. Apparently, as the Guinness Book Guinness record.
it's a lot, but it always
He's
is
the Stephen
consistent.
King of artists.
Exactly. It's always consistent in style, but not always in level of detail. So you get pages like this where the background is realistic, and he's got a lot of texture and kind of shadow work and stuff with all the detail, and particularly the Batman villain. Not a Batman villain, but a villain named Batman. But not every page is this detailed, and that's how he's able to get out as many pages as he's able to.
Mhm. No, and it kind of fits into that like old school Spider-Man thing where you don't always draw all the webs, but when you have the big moments, that's when you do the most detail.
Did you ever feel like the experience suffered for that? Did you ever find yourself going like, I wish, this particular panel had more going on in it? Or did it seem like it was doing what it needed to for the scene you were reading?
Yeah, no, I never really had that. I think it probably does help that I've been reading, as well as Ghost Rider. I've also been reading through Lee Ditko Spider-Man again,
Yeah.
so that probably also helps. You get like a lot of panels like that.
I think they're using a lot of the same tools of the trade to
Mhm.
to get the thing out on time.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
And I
I'm
don't know,
sure
that
if he,
kind of thing doesn't bother me.
because I'm sure if time were no object, every page would look like this.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
But it also might be for the sake of emphasis to some degree, where it's like these are the money shots, these are the big exciting action sequences, and then you've got other things that aren't intended to be the same kind of cinematic.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mentioned that I'm a Genji Ito fan, and you'll get scenes that aren't like incredibly rich with detail. Like he is a pretty detailed artist, but you get those big like full page spreads where it's like 8 billion small painted lines that would take hours. And I look at it and it's like, man,
Yeah,
how?
every time I hear that, the first artist that comes to mind is Winsor Smith.
Okay, yeah. Just I don't know. I
Just all
I
that
can trust big
circuitry.
people.
Like, why do you need to draw that? But I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to talk about the love interest in this and the kind of like Daredevil '03 Elektra plot?
Yes. So, well, so also before I get to that, I'll just mention because I mentioned the origin and then the story from that point on.
Oh,
Is
I'm sorry, I
basically-
cut you off in the middle of that.
No, it's okay. I just figured I should.
We never finished that.
No, I just figured I should mention it because I got to mention Spider-Man with the love interest thing. But after the origin, it's basically just like you got Spider-Man, Batman, and then Cobra Man, and it's basically like Spider-Man shows up. Spider-Man doesn't like Kamen Rider. They have a fight. Kamen Rider wins. Kamen Rider man. Um,
It's so good. It's exactly how it reads.
yeah, exactly. We're just missing Triangle Man. He shows up later, I'm sure.
And
Um,
Person Man. There's no Person Man.
Oh no. Well, I'm sure Kamen Rider beats him over the head with a frying pan at some point in that issue. But the whole thing with the love interest.
That was the They
in
Might
that
Be
is-
Giants reference. If you've never listened to They Might Be Giants, but you're like my age or 10 years younger, that's probably one of two TMBG songs you've ever heard before.
Yeah, if you've never heard Flood, go listen to Flood. It's a great album.
It is.
But the whole love interest thing in this book is she sees Spider-Man he kind of like wraps webbing around his throat and chokes him out, which made me really laugh because my like go-to joke for like Marvel things that I don't want that I say I do is a Zack Snyder Spider-Man where he goes around hanging people with his web.
Yeah, you never thought you'd see it in something, but like he's the
Yeah,
villain,
no,
so he's gonna do stuff like
exactly.
that.
I never thought I'd actually get to see that. But so she walks in and sees this. Well, the guy that like is Kamen Rider, he's there, so she blames it on him, and it's very Daredevil the movie. And luckily, we kind of get over that pretty quick. We're not just stuck with like, man, you suck. I'm gonna go cut some sandbags.
I didn't think it would be resolved in the volume. I mean, I figured it would be like in the TV show, episodes and episodes, and maybe it is because we've not watched past that first episode. But
Yeah.
it seems like things are happening pretty lickety split because like we said earlier, I mean, the very next episode is going to be Batman.
The third episode is not Cobra Man, so it seems like that might be where it kind of goes off.
Diverges at some point, yeah. Or maybe the TV show has a bunch of filler episodes that the comic skips, and then at some point it gets back to where the comic is. I guess that could
be
happen
too, yeah. Cobra Man's also like a much crazier design, so that it would be way harder to do like on TV with no budget.
It's weird watching the TV show versus the comic just with her because in the comic and like I said, it's pretty much the same story and most things happen almost exactly the same way, except a little sillier and with more like sped up footage and some weird editing choices. But in the and a really catchy theme song that I couldn't get out of my head for a couple of days. This weird juxtaposition where the show feels real dark and moody, and then all of a sudden it's just so bouncy with the rider!
Which is great. That's what I would hope, because the Japanese Spider-Man theme is also awesome. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that that happened.
But yeah, in the book, she walks in, or she's in there when it happens. And like when her father's getting killed, and it's her father, right?
And yes, it is.
Just like with Elektra, and he's standing over him, but it seems like she had to have kind of saw what happened, sort of like with Elektra, but we're being really kind of ambiguous as to what exactly she saw and where she was standing. And then in the TV show, she's not anywhere around, and then she walks in and just makes the assumption he must have done it.
I mean, yeah, when you find somebody next to a dead body when you walk into a room, you just go, oh, that guy did it.
I don't know. She has no reason other than the fact that he's there to suspect him, and then after that, everything he does is, against Shocker and real above board and real altruistic. But like you said, it's good that it doesn't take too long, and I think by the end of that first episode, they haven't reconciled it yet. But they don't until the Batman stuff anyway, so...
Yeah, because it's through the whole Batman thing that she kind of realizes that he's cool.
Yeah. But I wanted to mention that because I thought it was really funny that it was just Elektra all over again.
At least Bullseye wasn't right in front of her. That's...
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Because the Spider-Man was also clearly there.
Yeah. Yeah, at least it's not like, this thing, like, there's another person there, he spins his web, and Kamen Rider, like, leaps to grab it, but misses, and then the web kills the dad, and she's witnessing all of this.
Another thing that this has in common with Batman, obviously, is Kamen Rider in this does a lot of detective work, and it's kind of nice that he's got, some real ingenuity and resourcefulness. He is a super genius, which is very often a little bit too easy, but I appreciate the fact that he was grabbed because he's a genius. So, that's why he has his powers in the first place, is Shocker's going after, the smartest and the best of the best, and he's, going to some kind of science college, some kind of institute. And so, he's a genius who gets powers, but he gets them because he's a genius. And I just had this thought, it's also kind of nice that all the villains are And again, this is the kind of thing where you're not going to expect a lot of like real deep characterization in the first place, but all your bad guys are kind of automatons that are being controlled by a secret evil organization, so they're not going to have a lot of character dimension anyway. Like, they couldn't possibly. So it's kind of nice that you have an excuse to do it that way when you just want monsters, but they also were real people in the first place. So our character can sympathize with them to some degree, while simultaneously we don't have to.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's the little things that help like bump it up a bit. Not that like, just being actiony is bad. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah,
not
but it
thoughtless.
makes it more memorable. I mean, I
Yeah.
would go as far as to say that if this, a lot of ifs here, but like if this comes out in America and is allowed to somehow, and is as dark as it is, but as fun as it is, and exciting and everything, and didn't have a goofy TV show that happened simultaneously that more people saw, this is a classic comic book.
Yeah. No, I can
There's
agree with
no
that.
reason this shouldn't catch on in the same way that Batman or Spider-Man did. I would say.
At least to the same degree as something like Ghost Rider. Where it's not maybe like one of the biggest ones, but it is still like a second stringer.
Yeah, I mean, I could see this almost appealing to the pulp hero crowd as much or more, right? It feels like it kind of straddles the fence between like mainstream modern superhero and a more kind of pulpish sort of thing. And I'm glad I mentioned pulp, because another thing this reminded me of a lot is like old serials. Tonally, it's a lot like 30s and 40s serials.
Oh, okay, cool. I've never seen any of those, but that's interesting.
Go back to like the 1943 Batman serial, and I was getting a lot of vibes from that with this.
Oh, awesome. I'll have to check that out. That's always been one of those things I'd like to see, but never
But
got
yeah,
around.
maybe like a Green Hornet or something.
Yeah, I could see that. You
As
get
far as the sort of
Seth
popularity it
Rogen,
might have gotten.
Kamen Rider movie.
Oh, I wanted to make sure that this came up at some point. Sometime soon, I don't know if it's this year or next year, Shin Kamen Rider is supposed to come out, made by the same guy who did Shin Godzilla, which I absolutely adored. I can't imagine what he
great.
does with this material, but we're going to have to look at that and review it when it comes out, Austin. I'm really excited about that. I found out about that just researching for this, and I was like, wait, that's going to be a thing?
No, we're an expert on that guy because he also did Evangelion.
Oh, yeah. That, well, maybe
And we
it'll
know
just,
all about Evangelion.
maybe it'll be Man Bat Crazy, and we won't even know what we're looking at, and it'll be all abstract and existential and.
Mhm. Yeah, like some of the parts of Shin Godzilla where it gets weird.
Okay, so we have already passed the minute count of where we recorded that with the video that didn't get posted. So what else haven't we talked about that we want to make sure and talk about? That show couldn't get to 100 episodes. It only made 98, but we actually have a chance at a full hour now.
Yeah, no, last time we made it 58. It was perfect. But now maybe this time we'll make it to an hour.
Anything else you want to bring up?
I nothing that's coming to mind. I feel like we've pretty much covered everything we did last time. I think.
Yeah. I think we have nothing else is hitting me. A lot of I almost said a lot of people. One guy is making a lot of TBG references right now, or is specifically just saying lines from Particle Man.
I like that. I used to listen to that song all the time as a kid.
So
That's
it looks
great.
like we've got a Kamen Rider fan that just came in and saw that we were reviewing this, and has probably never seen the channel before, but Prand Kamen Rider 8, welcome, thanks for being here. The creator is a fan of insects, that's why Kamen Rider have a lot of insect stuff, and it's really dark in Japan compared to American. Yeah, absolutely it is.
Mhm. Definitely. No, the Japanese are able to get away with a lot more stuff, it seems like. I know, like, the Power Rangers. Doesn't the Green Ranger die or something in the original Sentai?
Yeah, and it's kind of heartbreaking the way it plays. And
Hmm.
all the drama and conflict in the American show is just, his powers are weak because it came from because it's an evil power, and now he doesn't have his powers, and that's sad. He doesn't get to be a Power Ranger. He's getting him back for a minute, but they don't work as well as they used to, and he's gonna lose it at some point. That sucks. Oh, he's got him back again. Oh, he's lost him for good. Now there's the White Ranger. Gee, I wonder who that's gonna be. Oh, it's Tommy. I'm so surprised.
Well, it certainly does suck.
I mean, I love that stuff, but I'm sure I wouldn't if I hadn't grown up with it. But anyway, yeah, did you not find yourself reading this wishing that somehow in a perfect world everything could be done like this? I mean,
Yeah,
where you'd have like the creator's full-on uncompromised vision, and then what a group of people were able to come together to do, the best possible adaptation of that thing simultaneously, and you could decide for yourself, which was better. But where the creator always, sort of like you write a novel and then maybe it becomes a movie, but you always have the novel. I wish somehow everything that's real action driven could have like a brilliantly drawn grouping of storyboards that reads as its own thing. That's just what the creator intended. But then it helps with this that this guy is a comic book guy doing this.
Hmm. Yeah, like George Lucas couldn't do this with Star Wars, but it would be cool if you could see that.
Yeah. Somehow you could get into his
you know
head.
what I want?
Yeah.
I want this for Ghostbusters, where you have just that movie and the complete, unabashed Dan Aykroyd version in comic form. That's like 8 billion pages and makes no sense, but I want it.
See, I feel like that's a great American novel before it's anything.
Yeah, that's what I want, and it's stuff that only you can understand.
In Shoma, there in the comments, though I feel the upcoming Shin Kamen Rider will have a more serious bent until we get to the third act, where Anno will probably lean into the madness of the television series. That is a real fair guess. I think, yeah. I mean, I'm expecting it to take itself 100% seriously, and probably have some absurdity in concepts and things, lean into that, because it would absolutely have to. But like the characters in the thing take it completely seriously, and then but that's a good prediction that like by the third act it just kind of unravels.
I also think he'll run with the horror elements of this.
I don't know that I would have been as excited about that until I read this, because I can kind of imagine what it might look like now.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I don't know exactly.
If I just watched the TV show,
like,
I wouldn't have a visual in my head of what that looks like.
if he's doing Batman, like, I could see it getting like real crazy, but I don't know exactly what he's doing in that, or if he's even using, villains from this material.
Yeah, because you would. I mean, looking at this, my first thought with him would be go back to the original material, especially because it's classic and iconic, especially over there. But then there's all this history to mine, just like with Power Rangers.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly. Looking this up.
I don't think it has. See, I kind of don't want to know until I see it. I don't think it has necessarily the Power Rangers thing, although correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know a lot about the Kamen Rider fandom, even. But I wonder if Kamen Rider fans would be irritated if they get irritated when things go back to the original material, like a lot of Power Ranger fans do, where they're like, there's all this great material later, and the Disney era is the best era, and why do we only do Mighty Morphin because of nostalgia? I doubt if Kamen Rider has that.
Doesn't seem like they even say like what villains he's going to use. That's interesting. He's also doing Shin Ultraman.
Oh, interesting. Well, and the big difference with, I mean, Ultraman's not like this, I don't think, but the big difference with something like Godzilla and Kamen Rider is there's there's different iterations and characterizations and stuff, but Godzilla is a character. Kamen Rider is a bunch of characters.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's
just
really
like with Power
interesting,
Rangers.
too, because with Godzilla, at least with Shin Godzilla, he kind of threw out like everything and was like, okay, this is, like the basics of Godzilla, and then added stuff to it. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I would have thought would be like a no-no to do with Godzilla that he does in that movie.
That shockingly worked there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figure he'll go his own way with this, and he'll take the initial basic concept, but he'll create his own character, and maybe it'll have the same name, but...
Mm-hmm.
But then, doing something like Shocker seems very in his wheelhouse.
In the like basic like premise, it did say that it's like a college student going up against Shocker, so it is like the basic premise.
Okay.
It just doesn't say if it's gonna have like Spider-Man or Batman or whatever.
But it means that he's not looking at more recent iterations, and he's probably not going to lean into the Sentai side that much.
Mm-hmm.
At least in that initial premise. Pran Kamen Rider 8 again. It'd be cool if you guys get the Blu-ray of Kamen Rider 01 on Blu-ray and get your review on that. Shout Factory been getting into releasing Kamen Rider on Blu-ray. Yeah, I knew they were putting out some stuff, and a lot of that is streaming. I don't know if it's still streaming on Shout Factory. What was the streaming service that we watched this on? It's got several of them, and I think 01 might be one of them. I can't remember.
Oh, it's on Tubby.
I think it's Tubi.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't mean to get offensive. Sorry.
Did you find yourself wanting to watch any more of that after you saw that pilot?
Yeah. Probably not by myself, but like get like a group of people together to watch it. That's probably the way to go.
It'd be good for a blind commentary stream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That type of thing. Maybe not with it being on like 2 weeks and you got to stop for ads. It becomes really awkward.
Don't you hate that? Yeah, and we've had to do that before.
Yeah, like that Samurai Cop one where it's like, okay, hold on, now I got ads.
In
Okay,
Shoma,
oh, now I got ads.
Inshoma says, I feel there's a huge generation gap and related disconnect between the original era Kamen Riders, 70s and 80s, and the modern ones, 2000s to now, so fans are indifferent to their respective influences. Yeah, and Power Rangers doesn't have that as much, I guess. Yeah, there's some of that. I mean, I think a lot of people that came late can still go back and appreciate Mighty Morphin to like some degree. But yeah, there are probably people that just never looked at the original that were really into the Disney stuff or whatever. But yeah, the way you describe it sounds sort of like Sonic fans, where it's like almost two completely different franchises. Yeah.
It's Sonic, except with at like a certain point, every single thing that's ever released with Sonic splits it off into more subcategories.
Inshowa says the upcoming Shin Kamen Rider appears to be a direct homage to the very first series and might reintroduce younger generations to the pure concept. Having looked at this, that's what I'm hoping it is.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm interested to see that when it comes out.
Well, anyway, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. And Austin, I really enjoyed doing this live. We did get some information from folks and met a couple people that I don't think have been in our streams before. So we should consider doing more of these this way, I think.
Mm-hmm. We should do more dress rehearsals, too. I like that.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
I don't have enough time in my week to do that, buddy. I can't get together, shoot for an hour, and okay, let's do the real thing on Tuesday.
Just pick some of the kids and Hansel and Gretel them. Just throw them in the woods and be like, okay, now I got more time.
So thanks for watching live. Thanks for watching later on if you're doing that. If you'd like to make a request for TheReQuest, you can join the $15 tier on Patreon, and that will ensure one request for you. You can stay there for as long as you want to. Several people are doing this, and that will keep you in the rotation, but don't feel like you have to do that. You'll get one right now every 3 to 4 months or so, because we do these weekly. We do these as close to weekly as possible. Occasionally there's an issue like we had this last week, but You can request a comic like we did today, and we're actually going to have, I think, 3 comics in a row coming up here, starting with this one. But you can also request a movie, which is what people mostly do, and in any genre, and you can ask for a pilot for a TV show, unless it's a show that one of us knows pretty well or has seen some of, and you can request maybe an episode somewhere within the show. Ask me first. We'll decide if it's a thing that makes sense for us to do. And you can just pledge one time if you want to, let it roll over for a month, and you'll be in the rotation, or rather your request will get done when we get to you. So don't feel like you have to stay pledged in order to get one. And you can even just do a PayPal payment for $15 one time and get there as well. And just email me and I'll tell you how to do that. Anyway, thanks a whole bunch, everybody, for watching. Hope you had a good time with us, and I will see you again on Thursday for the Captain Logan Show at 7 Central.
And before we go, I'm going to use my psychic abilities to guess what we're doing next time.
Oh, I think you might know it.
Yeah, through my power. Okay, next time we're going to be doing the 8th arc of Punisher Max, which is Widowmaker, which was suggested by something like Wookie Cookie or something. Wookie's Cookie.
Chewbacca's Lover. I love that you remember that. I didn't even have to go look at it again. Oh, you know what we forgot to talk about with this?
What's that?
So yes, we will be doing that next time, and I've actually reviewed 2 arcs asked for by Chewbacca's Lover from Punisher Max before. This is a thing that Austin is actually really familiar with, and
it's one of my favorite comics.
Somewhat of an expert on, so he'll be able to take me through that a little bit. And like I said, I've read a couple of those arcs, but it's been months in between. I don't remember a lot of the side characters and things. And
most of that doesn't come back. There is some stuff that referenced with this specific arc, but we'll get there.
I'm glad you had a good time in Shoma. Come check us out again. And we do an eclectic assortment of comics and movies and things, but we're primarily superhero here, but we do lots of other things as well. Austin, one thing we forgot to mention, we won't get deep into it now that we're ending the show, but we forgot to mention the virus that controls people and turns them into powder.
Oh yeah, Batman's like vampirism, yeah.
Because that was really clever. I thought that was a really cool idea, but it also led to the most typical cliche supervillain thing in the whole book. Because in that moment, he does 2 big supervillain tropes, and apparently they're tropes even in Japan. They have different conventions, but some of them end up being exactly the same. You have a villain who tells the hero their whole plan because they think that the hero is about to die and it's not going to matter anyway. He goes, I'm going to give you this gift right before you die. Here's how you get the antidote. And the second thing is that the villain has an antidote for no reason. Because if you had a virus where you were just going to control people that would also turn them into powder sometimes inconveniently, why would you need that on hand? Why would you have that?
It's part of his body. It's just like little hook things in his wings.
Was he programmed that way by Shocker so that he would have this antidote, or was it just an unfortunate side effect of his mutation?
Yes.
Anyway, I'm glad I got that in there because I thought that was amusing.
No, that's pretty good. That whole thing is very nice because it's like the more they move, the faster they dissolve. It's like that story where all the lions run around until they become butter.
So, quick plug for Thursday, Captain Logan Show at 7 Central, and then Austin, tell everybody what we're doing on Friday this week.
We are doing the Punisher Max story. No,
okay, so we are doing that, but before that happens, do you remember? Do you know what we're doing?
Well, isn't it undecided?
It is undecided, but I want to announce that it's undecided.
Okay, so we're gonna pick 6 shows, and then you can do whatever, and then you can pick one.
So Austin and I are gonna do. I'm glad I went to you for that. Austin and I are. You can do whatever.
Or you could not. I don't really care.
So, you don't get to do commercials anymore unless you're reading copy. Austin and I are going to do another blind mini marathon on some superhero TV show. We don't know which one yet. We're each going to pick 3 things, and then you can do whatever. And on Thursday night for the Captain Logan show, we're going to have a goal that night, whichever, I guess not a goal, but whichever super chatter he has is the, I'm sorry, it's getting late. The top super chatter of that evening is going to get to pick from that list. So we'll each have 3, and I think whichever things I pick are more likely to get picked than Austin's things.
Oh, dang. I haven't fully decided. I said some things to you.
You told me some things, and many of them seemed like jokes and bad things, and I don't think people are going to pick those. I really don't. Like, intentionally bad things. But we'll see. I guess it can happen.
Oh. We'll see. We'll see.
Anyway, so see you Thursday. Hope to see you Friday, and take care, everybody. Thanks a lot for watching. I was Captain Logan, and this was Austin, the Day Ghost.
Whatever. Bye, everybody.